Well, hey there, all you cool cats and kittens. My name's Nick Olson. You're watching P3, the Professional Production Podcast. It's great to have you in tonight. We have a great show lined up for you all. We're going to be talking about lighting for video. We're super excited about it. But before we get into that much more, I would like to welcome in our hosts for the evening. My normal host, he has been with me this entire time. We'll welcome him in now, Mr. Brady Davis. Brady, how are you?
Hey, Nick. Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you too. I mean, this is the closest we get to actually seeing each other anymore, right?
It is the closest, yeah. I did my hair specifically for the podcast tonight. My wife looked at me like, wow, you look really different, because we haven't left our house in a week. So it's nice to see human beings, whether it be digitally or face-to-face.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you. I left the house today. I went to Kroger's with the S on there. Went to Kroger's today to pick up some groceries. Did the whole click list thing. So drove the Jeep out there and sat in a parking lot waiting for someone to put groceries in the back of my car. So it was...
They have everything?
They did not have everything. They had most of the stuff and made substitutions. It was a lot better than I thought it would be. But yeah, we got most everything, so I was pretty happy with it. Cool. We got lots of comments last time, by the way. I forgot to tell you about this on your bunny.
On my bunny. Oh, my bunny. Yes. For those of you who don't know, once we were told, hey, you should probably work from home, I took my desk, my monitors, my computer and everything from work and stole my daughter's room. Which includes a wonderful bunny above me. You can give thanks to my wife, Natalie Davis, who is open for interior design. She doesn't know that, but I just told the world that, hey, if you want to pay her to do interior design and put bunnies in your house, you can do that.
She's available for it. So
she's available.
Well, remote. I was going to say, last time AJ and I had the nice backdrop, and you have the bunny, but, I think the bunny now has to be a staple. Even if we get you a nice backdrop, I think the bunny has to be a staple of the stream.
Yeah, I think so too. Wherever we go in the future, we'll be bringing a bunny. Hopefully this bunny with us.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a plan. So super excited tonight too. We have a great guest lined up. Just one of my friends and someone that's super knowledgeable about lighting, and he carries a lot of weight to him with the title that we have for him. So I want to welcome him in now all the way from Atlanta. It is Dusty Harrison. Dusty, welcome.
Hey guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dusty. Yeah, Dusty, again, thank you for joining us. It's, again, really great to have you. And Dusty, real quick, before we get things kicked off, and again, the focus of tonight's show is we're talking about lighting for video. I wanted you to go through and talk real quick about what you're doing right now. Well, nothing right now, but what you're normally doing and kind of what you've done.
Sure. Yeah. So currently, I think we're creeping up on day 30, 31 of no work. So that's been tough, but it's been interesting. Learned a lot in these trying times. So yeah, not a whole lot going on right now. But before COVID-19 hit, I was working as the lighting director for NBA Tuesday show. Also helping out there on their Thursday show, but that's a show that's been running for 10, 15 years now. So they've kind of got that buttoned up. The only reason I was really involved with that was because Tuesday show is a brand new show, and it was built inside the environment, inside the same studio that Thursday shoots in. So there was already infrastructure in place. There's already a show that happens there. So everything that you see, if you tune in on Tuesday night, everything that you see loads in and out weekly. So it's pretty massive overtaking. It takes roughly 3 days between lighting and scenic and everything to fully flip the room. So it's pretty crazy. Just to talk a little bit about where I came from. I started off at a young age, just kind of working for local production companies. Did that all the way through college. Following that, I moved into the larger church market and married my beautiful wife, Megan. And at that point, we moved up to Indiana, just looking to create some space and kind of figure out who we were. And not figure it out, but establish ourselves as a couple. So moved up to Indiana. It's where we met. Man, is it cold there in the winter? Oh my gosh. So I'm initially from Alabama and was not ready for that. So that worked out for a little while, and then I had to move back down here to the warm heat and started working for PRG for a short time, and then stepped out to the freelance market just to kind of refocus myself around lighting and media server and anything in that sector. So that's kind of where we are currently.
Awesome. That's awesome. I remember when you moved to Indiana and how rough that was with the weather for you. And just, I think probably right as you got used to it was about the time that you were like, all right, well, time to go. Looks like we'll head back to the warmth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Which, like, I still enjoyed the very beginning of snow season. It was just 3-4 months into it. You're like, come on, let's change the scenery, something. Let's get rid of this brown snow.
Well, it's funny too, because no matter how long you live in a cold weather state, in Indiana, it's kind of one of the in-betweeners, right? Like, we have great weather here during the summer. It's beautiful right now. It's 75 degrees outside, sunny. Got my windows open in the office if you hear kids or cars passing by. But you know, with cold weather, there is that time where it's like the first couple snows, it's like, man, this is so great, and then it just gets unbelievably cold, and it's miserable, and then it lasts for 4 more months. So yeah, I totally feel that. So real quick, before we get started into Dusty, and we're going to talk about what he's doing with the NBA TNT studios there. We wanted to hit on what we're doing tonight again. Again, we're talking about lighting for video. We're talking about lighting for video and for your live streams too. So we're taking your questions all night long on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Force Tech Solutions. We're also taking your questions over on our YouTube page. We don't have a hyperlink for that yet. We need your help. We need you to subscribe so we can get to 100 subscribers and get our permalink for that. So head on over to the YouTube page. Also, a big advantage to the YouTube page too. You can watch over there in full high definition versus Facebook is just doing 720. And then we're also taking your questions via our phone number. You can call in 317-586-2844. Jenny is answering those lines, and we'll be able to pass you through as well to ask your questions tonight. So taking your questions there, and you can also email us info@force.tech. We'll be taking the questions live as well. So Dusty, you did a really cool thing recently though, and that was you got to step into a fresh space and you got to design a lighting rig with, I remember in a text message that you sent me, a budget that maybe was unlimited or limited or, in the mix, right? Obviously, maybe a higher budget than most of us are usually dealing with. But tell us about the studio at Turner that the NBA is working in, and kind of how you designed that and what fixtures you used and some other cool information about that studio.
So while there were a ton of room to play around, there were some things to do with the studio, specifically with structures, different set pieces that flew in and out, things that we did have to take into consideration and work around. I will say that this was an extremely tight timeline show from the time of conception to the time of install. It was a pretty quick turn. So we started out with a rough draft, drafted up by the sales team on the show, and looked at that. And then due to the tight timeline that we were constricted by, we were limited on how long would it take to get gear in so that we could then prep the gear so that then we could install the gear. So we pulled all of our availability list from the closest warehouses, and tore through that and said, all right, these are our core ideas. This is what we want to achieve with the studio. We want to be able to reproduce the renders that were drafted by the client, which was a very clean, very almost completely gray-white set. But we also wanted to be able to, at the push of a button, totally change the aesthetic of the space and really breathe some different life into it for some different segments and wacky bits of the shows and stuff like that. So That was really our driving force behind it. Was one, we want to reproduce what they rendered, and two, we want to have complete flexibility. If somebody says, "Hey, can we do this?" we want to be able to say yes. And I think we got there. It's 100% LED rig for the Tuesday night show, which is drastically different than the Thursday night show, who is 100% in, with some LED color flare here and there. We probably, we may have roughly 10 or so 2K for now is hanging out, but outside of that, we're all LED. So the entire room is color changing. And that's what I would say is one of the strongest points to the studio.
No.
And in that, Dusty, are you using a lot of full color fixtures, or are you using a mixture of full color fixtures and maybe some variable white fixtures, especially for your whites? What are you guys seeing there, at least at your studio?
Mostly everything is full color. We use a ton of the ETC Luster Series 2s, which is just a great front light, great key light. And we have a couple of those splattered around on set pieces as well. We ended up using Color Force Series 1s for wall washes, which are still phenomenal fixtures. Got a little bit of weight to them, but man, they pack a punch and they do some really great color. A good bit of Martin Septrons are involved. We've got some of the brand newish VL 2600s in there. Super packed fixture is LED engine. There's no strike or DOS commands at the beginning or end of each day, so that's pretty great. They're fast. What else do we have in there? We got some Impression X4s, just for a little bit of eye candy. Wanted something to throw some flare back at the lens. So those are doing a great job of that. And then there's just a ton of architectural LED tape built into the set that really livens up a lot of the set pieces. In addition to a handful of color source bars thrown about.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a lot more lights than I have in my room right now. So that's cool. Maybe you could, when you're done with some of those, send those over to my way, and I can use them for a little while. So tell me about day-to-day operation. So as you're walking into the studio, how early do you arrive for a show? And then kind of what's your, what are you doing? What are you doing then during the actual show?
Yeah. So we touch on a little. Most of my past is outside of a studio. So I've done a lot with touring. I've done a lot with festivals, big, large corporate gatherings where you have large quantities of people in the room with you. And at that point, you can really feel the pressure, the excitement, and the anticipation just building. When you're in a studio, it's a quiet environment, and it's 30, 40, 50 people that you may see, and it's calm and it's relaxed, and there's not a lot of screaming and cheering, and so it's chill and it's laid back, but at the same time you're reaching 7-8 million people every week, and so that has been a neat turn. Just to kind of remind yourself of that and keep that in the back of your head. Like, you've got to be on your toes. You got to be on your game. You don't want to miss anything. You don't want to mess anything up. You don't want to cause any oopsies during a live broadcast. So as far as my day-to-day kind of walk through, we show up 3 to 4 hours before we go live. At that point, all the teams come in, cameras come in. Everybody comes in and pushes their stuff in the room that they need, gets their cables laid out, starts their systems up. I work very close with the the two master electricians that are helping me on this one, and we have a certain number of just kind of pre-built test patterns that we want to run through the rig. Kind of puts the rig through its paces and is very obvious if anything is not performing. That 3 to 4 window gives us time to make any tweaks that we need. If we need to swap out any instruments, we have spares for everything on site. So if we need to turn anything over, we can do that. Once everybody kind of gets everything put together, just a couple of hours before we go live, the director will come out. We'll talk through the night show, everything that we want to tape, pre-tape, everything that we want to run, and that's kind of just our little production meeting with everybody at Talent Hall. And after that, it's dinner time. They feed you well, and then we get in our spots and we run the show. It's all because there's not a ton of like live cues in the room. You're listening to everything come at you on headset, right? So there is a stage manager in the room that will call out time to live, but for the most part, you're listening in for cues on camera, and just hit your mark.
Now, the question that I think everyone wants to know is this. You're a big guy. You're like what, 6'4" or 5"?
Mm-hmm.
How's it hanging out with Shaq?
I'm a baby next to Shaq. I'm a baby. Absolutely. I feel so small and so cuddly, and like he could just pick me up one-handed. I have yet to get used to it. I'll tell you that much. I've seen him. I worked with him on the finals last year. I'm working with him down at Turner now, and I've yet to grow accustomed to his height and his size, and he's just a big dude.
Yeah, that's right. Because you worked the NBA Finals too in Golden State last year, right? For doing lighting as well there.
Yes, that was incredible. That was an incredible opportunity.
You were making me jealous as you were sending me text messages, and then you was it last year or the year before you were doing the Super Bowl as well?
That was 2019, the Super Bowl 53. So okay. The one that's here in Atlanta.
Atlanta, that's right. Awesome. We got first question here from Facebook chat. And remember, guys, we're taking your questions, Facebook, YouTube, as well as our phone number, 317-586-2844. Have our first question here for you, Dusty. And I'm going to read it out for you, okay? It is this. I know I've asked before, but asking again with a lighting specialist around. That's a good call because he knows more than we do. Are there any recommendations for raising the whole room lighting for a church sanctuary with the following criteria? The reason, 24 dB of gain on our PTZ cameras with the iris wide open and shutter off at 1/60th. Current lighting is 9 by 24 bulb candelabra chandeliers with 60 watt bulbs over the congregation plus 10 100 watt can lights over the pulpit in peaked ceilings, all LED dimmable. No flicker problems there. The goal is to increase the overall light without super intrusive lighting fixtures and keeping the traditional feel of the room and not turn it into a blinding room either. Dusty, solve the problems. Solve the world's problems.
So as far as I'm understanding, she is looking for to be able to shoot the room, right? Not just the stage. He wants the entire room to be brighter, correct? I wish I had that question in front of me.
Yeah, it sounds like that'd be helpful next time to add you to our internal chat here. It sounds like they're having to run the gain up on the camera pretty high. The iris is all the way open. The shutter's off. So probably either off or 1/30th or 1/60th. So it sounds like, the goal is just to, how to raise, I guess, the whole room. It sounds more like a traditional service too. So maybe the room and the stage are pretty similar. And they're just wanting to run the overall iris or overall gain down because I'm sure it's adding a lot of noise to their cameras.
Gotcha. Yeah. So question could be asked, is it a camera or is it a lighting fix to be had? If it's on the lighting side and you want to retain the traditional feel of chandeliers with incandescent bulbs and all that, maybe it's just adding more. sconces on the walls, any sources of light that you can get to brighten it up. Is daylight an option? You know, do you have windows? Are they covered up? Can we uncover those? You know, without, if you want to go the intelligent route, lots of manufacturers out there have some really good solutions for lights that aren't overly techy, you know, so they don't just scream, I should be on a stage, right? So you could get away with tucking some of those guys up in the rafters. Those can even offer full color changing flexibility. So while you may not wash your entire house in super saturated magenta, it does give you the flexibility to kind of tone your whites and shift those throughout the day. If you are trying to balance with some incandescent stuff, or if you want to match daylight as that changes throughout the day.
Yeah,
lots of options.
And I know too, like Chauvet has, they have their smaller Fresnel fixtures that are really, really tiny. We just used them on a project here in Indy with a more traditional church, and we were able to get them behind their laminated beams pretty tightly. So they're smaller fixtures. Those were warm white, cool white fixtures, just mixing between those two, which leads me to a question. What are your feelings, by the way, about using colored front lighting fixtures, whether it be for, and I know we're talking really about shooting lighting for video, but what are your thoughts on using colored front lighting fixtures, or, you know, just sticking to warm white, cool white, or even just gelling maybe a fixture that just has a single output?
Depends on, I mean, obviously if it depends on what you have to work with. If I could just be a kid in a candy shop and I could go after it and pick whatever units I wanted to pick, I think I would use a tool such as a Luster 2 that offers me full color changing capability. I'm never in a situation where I walk away from a show and I'm like, oh man, I had way too much capability or way too much flexibility. I always want more, right? So give me the most amount of flexibility I can have, and then I'll choose whether or not, you know, I need to use it.
So what you're saying is you want ultraviolet light as well on the front light there.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, for sure. People in like fluorescent pink look great. Yes.
We have your friends in chat, by the way, and I think they're trolling. I think they're asking. I saw Evan up there earlier. He was asking about red and green lights for Christmas. I saw Jake in here, which is one of my friends as well. He's talking about passing 208 over Edison. So I imagine there's some backstories here.
Oh man.
You trying to pass Edison or 208 over Edison? Can you pass 208? Now this is a dumb question, but 208 is obviously just a voltage, you know, and it's a connector that I don't know what the max. So like, what is it? A 520 is an Edison connector. I don't know what the max voltage is for an Edison connector or the amperage.
You can drive a Ferrari off of a cliff, but
should you?
Should you?
Hey, now
you're gonna die.
I don't want you doing that with my Ferrari. So.
Remember, if it's a PowerCon connector, it's not meant to be connected under load. Anyways, you know, that's not a way of just getting us all to buy True One connectors.
So can you? Sure. Should you? No. It's not rated for it. And there's a reason that here in America we have mechanically different plugs and connectors for differing between voltages. It's so that you don't run, which, you know, most everything now has a switching power supply in it, right? Which would be happy in a huge range of voltages. But say you didn't. Say you had a 120 volt powered electric drill and you happen to run 2 Edison outlet. Well, that drill will spin really fast for a short bit of time. You know,
that's better. That way you get your job done quicker.
Oh, absolutely.
I did want to say recently, we've been designing systems. We were designing a mixed use system with mixed voltages in it, and we were just planning on tagging things. But did you know it's not to code? It's against code to use the same connector type for 2 different voltages. So you can, for example, PowerCon or a True One, right? Both of those connectors are both capable of passing 200 and some odd volts at 20 amps, I believe. Or like Sockapex is another good example, or Socapex is depending on whether or not if you're a nut. Even something as simple as, I don't know. Yeah, I think those were kind of the three primary examples. You're really only supposed to use one cable for one different voltage, for one voltage type. So you cannot mix a system with 208 PowerCon and 110 PowerCon. It's against code, I guess, and they're all supposed to be the same if they're in the same house. So interesting.
Is it something that applies just to like fixed install in that case?
No.
And only on the output side?
No,
I'm going to assume that's just fixed install, right? Like
it's not. I asked the people that told us about that. This was, I believe, Lex that told us about this.
Really?
Yeah, Lex was the ones that told us
They're
you're not
just trying to
supposed
get you
to.
by
Now they
five
said it's
different
done
cables.
constantly. It's done constantly, but apparently you're not supposed to do it. So, Brady, I think you had a question over there from chat for us for Dusty.
Yeah, Dusty, here's a good question. I think Nick and I have opinions on this too, but I'm really interested to get your opinion, especially since this is the day. It's about RG or RGBW house lighting. Specifically, you're seeing a lot of LED fixtures, at least in House of Worship and probably other markets as well that are RGBW. That means you can play with your house, change the whole color of your room if you want to. So the specific question was interested in Dusty's take on RGBW house lighting. They need overhaul there starting from scratch. Is it worth it to jump up to the RGBW, or should you just stay with white? That's a really good way to start.
Yeah. So
I like this. It means he's actually thinking about the question versus what I do, which is usually just say I say the first thing that comes to my mind. So that's great.
Well, I think there's a few different takes. There's the House of Worship market, which you're always thinking about budget, and then there's the other markets where if it fits in budget, sure, do it. Who knows if we'll use it?
And retrofitting is cheaper. Because half of the battle, and I've taken a look at this with so many different clients now. Half the battle is the infrastructure, right? Because it's about running DMX to every fixture. It's about supplying every fixture with constant power.
In this specific question, he says starting from scratch.
Sure.
In my mind, that means sky's the limit. Are we starting from scratch trying to get new lighting, or are we starting from scratch ripping all lighting out and running new high voltage? And just redoing it. So
I have an opinion on this, but we're letting Dusty answer it first because he's the lighting expert.
Is this specifically geared towards House of Worship?
This specific question is yes.
Yeah, and this is with Kyle Peterson, by the way. So Kyle, thanks for asking your questions, man.
Hey Kyle. So yeah, I would. This kind of goes back to what we talked about with Nick and doing color mix capable front light. I would always lean towards having more capability rather than less. Even if it's something that you only pulled out of your arsenal a couple of times, I see a ton of churches moving to that model. And if it's something that you feel like your specific congregation would be receptive to, then I would absolutely encourage it. I would wade into the shallow end of that pool once you do implement them and maybe not jump off of the high dive and belly flop it. I've a little bit of experience that I had at the church in Indiana where I worked with Nick. We had a large install there of colored house lighting at one of our other campuses, and we learned that running effects across some really deep saturated blues, saturated purples, started to make congregants feel a little bit queasy. So anytime that I help a church implement colored house lighting into their workflow, it's always treated as you set a single color and it's static at the top of each song, and it's just reinforcing the mood that you have happening on stage and pulling that out and trying to make the whole room feel a little bit more inclusive, of what's taking place. So it's not something where I'm going to just, abuse the audience and just put the house lights into an incredibly crazy strobe. But yeah, I think I would, I would have to look at the numbers. I don't do a lot of installs, like permanent installs, so I don't know what the cost difference is between a full color changing fixture and just a variable white fixture, just a static, solid one tone fixture. But I think I would absolutely try to go the color changing route, and then use it tastefully.
So, and Dusty, I 100% agree. I think we had learned about the science behind why effects, specifically with saturated reds and blues, can be disorienting, and one of the reasons for that was because of how we perceive reds and blues, right? So we perceive reds and blues based on red warmth daytime, and then at night we get red is amber is night, right? That's sun setting. That's when we get the amber shift, which is why we use red mode on our phones. And then blue, which is more associated with daytime, keeps you awake. That's why like casinos will have very blue white lights to keep you awake, pumping in oxygen. That's not a lighting discussion though. And apparently there are very few people, but there are people that get disoriented by the switching of the reds and the blues. And because that causes a chemical reaction in your minds, and it can actually cause some disorientation. So
about how many percent of people would you guys say had that disorientation?
I wouldn't say many.
You could even guess. I mean,
I wouldn't say many. When you're
talking a house of worship, though, even 1% is a high number of people who are dissatisfied.
I would say sick. In a room of 600 people, 2 services, I remember we had probably 2 or 3 people that did say, "Hey, it made me feel sick." And when you have one person come up and say it, it's one thing. When you have 2 or 3 people come up and say it, it's saying something, because obviously I don't think they conspired to tell us they were feeling sick. So yeah. Real quick before we go on, again, and before I give my opinion, we're taking your questions in chat. We're taking them over at our Facebook page, facebook.com/Force Tech Solutions. Also on YouTube. The link to the YouTube is in chat. If one of our admins could actually add the YouTube link to the pin, that'd be great. We are doing full 1080 over on the YouTube page. Also, we need your subscription so we can get a permalink. So go to the YouTube page. That link's going to be in the Facebook chat. And then we also are taking your questions via our phone number, 317-586-2844. And you can also email us, info@force.tech. Want to give a big shout out, by the way, to our local 30 guys from Indianapolis. They've been tuning in and checking this out over on the YouTube page. So I already saw earlier today on the YouTube page that the local 30 was holding it down. Thanks guys for tuning in. I hope you're all doing well in the midst of the break here, that everyone is finding something to do and stay busy with. So I want to say too, if you're just now tuning in, you missed the first 30 minutes, or maybe you've got to go, all of these videos will be posted live over on YouTube and on the Facebook page. They'll be posted for the video on demand. You can go back and rewatch them. And again, every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be doing this. Next week, we've got a great show lined up. We are bringing on Simon next week, I believe. Simon is the video engineer for Keith Urban. So Simon's going to be talking to us about, we've talked about how to do audio for video, lighting for video. Next week, Simon's going to be talking to us about how to do video for video. So I think that's how we put it. Video for video. Is that sound about right to you guys?
That's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Video for video.
Sounds right.
That'll be the name of next week's episode.
We'll let Simon answer.
Yes, I'll let Simon name the episode. Real quick, I wanted to get into my thoughts, Dusty, on the house lighting thing, because we've gone through this recently with a couple of clients. And here's the skinny of it. It is less expensive to do retrofit. So there's a company out there, they manufacture them, called Kanto USA. And Kanto is a manufacturer of direct retrofit for forward or reverse phase dimming systems. Because you can't just go stick a light bulb. Can't just go to Home Depot, grab an LED light bulb, and stick that in your fixture with your dimming system and expect it to work. They have to be specific. They've got to be specific for for the dimming system. So Kanto is the only manufacturer I know of that does both forward and reverse phase dimming. They have replacements for both 5, 6, 700 watt fixtures. And all you have to do is stick them in. They make them in different bases as well, mini candelabra, whatever the other bases are, and they even do bare wire. So that's by far the most inexpensive way to get into LED lighting with your current existing dimming system. If you're looking at doing retrofits, you're talking at a minimum, $1,000 a fixture, Dusty?
No, you're a little bit above that. If you're doing even just white, roughly around $1,200 to $1,400 a fixture, not including high voltage runs.
Yeah, and then you're running probably it would be wise to run 200 volts plus to them to get obviously more fixtures on circuits, and then you're running the DMX dome. So we're talking about electrical costs. If it's an open ceiling, the conduit costs, all of those different things. So it's very expensive to do the lighting, house lighting from scratch. So we did have a question earlier I want to go back to, and this is a video, lighting for video on the podcast, but a question earlier came in about what Shure mic do you recommend for streaming? That's a loaded question. It depends on what you're using to stream. I would say that if you're streaming off of an iPhone, we've talked about the iRigs, I think they're called, the last couple of weeks. They make some nice microphones for that. If you're talking about a headset microphone, we really like the DPA mics. Also, shout out to Thor. The Thor microphones sound really great too. And if you're talking about something that we're doing for streaming like a podcast, I'm using an RE27. It's a bit more of an expensive microphone. The SM7B is what the other guys are using. Dusty's just using his AirPods, but Brady's using the SM7B. AirPods. Those are Shure AirPods?
Shure AirPods.
Yeah. Shure Pods.
Are they the new
Shure Pods?
Shure and green as well? Or are they just white?
I'll just get some spike tape and be right back.
Nailed it. But yeah, SM7B, RE27, RE20, they're all good microphones. The RE20 is a bit more expensive. That's the classic radio microphone. The two most common ones we see are the RE20s and the RE20s, RE27s, and the SM7Bs as well.
And I will say, if you're looking to like just record off of your iPod or iPad or something, Shure makes a little mic. Oh, let me see if I can Google find it. It's just a little lightning adapter, and it's a stereo mic, and it sounds surprisingly good. And it's like $150. Let me see if I can find it.
Well, before you got on there and said Shure makes a mic, you have to find it first.
I know.
You don't just know that off the top of your head. Shure's
well,
price
it's a
list
consumer.
isn't
It's a
anything.
consumer grade thing, and I just don't think about those all the time.
No, I'm with
iPod
you.
mic. I'll just keep talking. That way, it makes it sound like I'm.
Well, let me ask.
It's
Dusty,
an MV88. MV88. It's a digital stereo.
MV88s.
That plugs in directly over Lightning. It sounds pretty good for $150 and plugs right into your phone.
Nice.
So.
Nice. I want to get back into, and again, we're still taking your questions here. Brady's going to be reading off the questions to Dusty as they come in. I'm going to keep questions flowing here to Dusty, but I do want to get into the next part of our conversation here with Dusty Harrison, who is the lighting designer for NBA on TNT Tuesdays. Dusty, I want to get in next to the basic design of a lighting system. The big things you're looking at when you start with a lighting system. So you've got an empty canvas, you've got an empty room, and you've identified that we're going to have 3 cameras set up. Maybe a double center shot and a roaming camera or a camera on the side or something like that. And we've just got a black box now design around it. What are, no special circumstances, what are the things you're taking into consideration when designing a lighting rig now for a video broadcast? And then also maybe to talk about, we understand that a lot of people are using not, lighting situations for broadcast right now. They're using maybe live lighting situations, concert lighting packages. How are you then maybe manipulating a concert or live lighting package to do broadcast?
Gotcha. Yeah. So the first thing with any room, there's going to be some form of limitation, where it's structural, or power, or there's going to be some infrastructure limitation to what you can achieve in a space. So I like to go through a space, do a walkthrough. It's always worth getting in there and finding out what things do I know, what things can we identify that we know we're going to have to work around. Moving forward from that point, I'm going to start just deconstructing key light. And what's my subject for my lighting? Does my subject move, or are they static in place? And if they're a human, they're going to move. For a wash, for a stage wash, I would say that my goal is 3 to 5 lights per area, and that's 1 center per area, and then fills off of that, at least 2 fills at 30 to 45. I'll lean more towards the 30 degrees off of that center point. And that's for each position. So if you took a 40-foot stage and you tried to do each position 8 feet wide, then you do the math and you have 5 positions, right? A, B, C, D, and E. And then each one of those positions getting a center key. And then, and I call these fills, but really they're all keys, right? Because the second a presenter turns off of center from that center key off to speak to this section of the room or speak to this camera, well, all of a sudden now this light that used to be their fill light is now their key. So it definitely starts there with what am I lighting and who are they talking to, who are they looking at? Are they moving? Are they running laps around this thing? Are they going to stand behind a lectern and give a presentation? Are they going to sit at a desk with 3 other people and talk about basketball all night? And then what was your parameters on how many cameras were in the room? I'm sorry.
Well, it could be anything, but let's just say 3 or 4 cameras in a space, I think is roughly a standard setup, right?
Okay, so assume that your presenter, if it's a presenter at a lectern, I want to chase down that road for a second. If you've got a presenter at a lectern and you've got 4 cameras in the room, assume that each camera needs to be able to take 1 shot of that presenter at the lectern. So if the presenter was to shift their focus in the space towards any of those 4 cameras, I need a key light above that camera position, right? And then I need fills based off of that, and then fills based off of that for as far as you want that presenter to be able to turn. So whatever the farthest around camera position is going to set my extremes, and then I'm going to light every position in from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely does.
100%.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you too was about, okay, so that's a simple setup, right? First off, we talk about depth a lot. I think one of the things that drives me crazy when I'm watching streams is a lack of depth. What are you doing to increase depth? Making it so a video is not so flat, because that's pretty much all done during lighting, right? Or through lighting. I think one of the things we do is we focus a lot on depth of field and a shallow depth of field, and we pick out these lenses that have these ridiculous shallow depth of fields, and we crank the iris down on them, and we blow out the background. And some people do that, and then they realize, okay, but it doesn't look any different, right? And that's because the background's already so flat. Creating a multi-dimensional set is all about the lighting. So what are you doing to increase the depth behind someone so that on my camera, I don't know, this blue background, like you can see my hand here is pretty blown out, right? So that's super helpful. But what could I do better to, every week we have someone on, by the way, ask these questions about what we can do better for the stream. What can I do better to create some more depth now between me and the curtain, and for someone who's in an empty room, what can they do better to create depth between them and maybe just a wall?
Gotcha. So physical depth is part of it, right? How far can you get away from your background? But then how can we realize some depth using just some lighting tools? In that same room where I've got a lectern, just going back to that, with 4 cameras, All right. Once that key light position is set, all right. Well, what are the cameras seeing on the other side of that subject? Is there something architectural there that I am going to be able to create some interest with, or am I digging from scratch? Do I need to throw some beams in the air, some eye candy, something to give the camera some depth behind that subject? Also, just backlight. Backlight is 90% of it, right? So that will really help pull your subject. And even in your home studio, Nick, if you want to hang up a lamp on the wall and shoot some backlight and kind of hit those shoulders and hit the hair. That way, if you decide to wear, what is your backdrop? Navy blue. So
it's
you
navy
wear
blue.
A navy blue shirt. It's going to pull you out from it.
And that's one of the things. If I was wearing a navy blue shirt right now, I'd blend right in with the background, right? So I have to make sure I'm wearing alternating colors, contrasting colors between my backdrop. So I just need to tell AJ, basically, I just need a little money to go out and buy a lamp for my shoulders, is what you're telling me.
We had a question in chat about lighting earlier, and specifically how awesome my beard looks apparently today. This was from Billy Stone down at French Lick Resort. And I'm just using a $5 IKEA light, guys. $5 light, shirt thrown over some diffusion. And I think I look relatively pretty. So
he's killing that IKEA light. I've got a Pacers lamp here, and then I've just got one of those floor standing 3 lamps, another light here. I'm really lighting from different angles, and the windows are open, and we've got sunlight in here. So I've got light coming at me from all different directions. Dusty, what about you? The lighting designer, what's your lighting setup like for the stream?
I'll be honest, it looks pretty doing something.
I'm imagining you're lighting the heck out of yourself, by the way, because of the backdrop.
I've got in my short ceiling unit here, I've got about 43 Viper Watch DXs, and they're doing great. They're awesome.
I expected nothing less.
I have a cheap Hue knockoff bulb in a floor standing IKEA lamp right over the top. I have no backlight, but I do have some visual interest, just some sunlight coming in that kind of helps break it up a little bit. So nothing
Nick,
too fancy, just kind of rocking the same setup as you. I don't have the t-shirt diffusion though, so
the t-shirt diffusion is key. I don't know if you guys are using it over at Turner yet, but yeah, all the big players are doing the t-shirt diffusion.
T-shirt, yeah.
Haynes works left.
Haynes
works best.
It depends on what the color is. If you go with the navy blue t-shirt, it's actually that's a quarter or half CTB, depending on the thickness of the actual shirt material.
Depending on if you bought it from Amazon or you went out to the mall and bought it. Yeah.
Don't go to the mall.
Does that only work in LED fixtures because of the temperature, or
100%? I do not recommend putting a t-shirt over a incandescent. If your house catches on fire, we're not liable.
That's called a color changing fixture. As the shirt melts away, the color changes.
We need a little bit more life in this design, guys.
Yes.
Oh, trust me, you just wait about 5 minutes. We'll get there.
The future of the show, Dusty, and you'll have to come and see it so you can come hang out with me too. And we'll just use it as an excuse for you to come back to Indy. The future of the show is that the room I'm sitting in right now is going to get redone. It's my house, but we're going to redo this room. It's my office, and we're going to put up some more cameras up. We've got 2 GoPros, a PTZ camera, switching, everything like that. And we're going to do the show locally here. So we'll have multiple guests. Brady will be here. We can all hang out here too, so it'll be a good time. Again,
Dusty, I do have a question for you, Dusty. Going real quick. Based in the House of Worship Market, and I say just because I attend a church here and volunteer on the production. We love Haze, as I'm sure many people do. Are you loving Haze in your environment as well when you're talking on air?
Hey, no haze, no praise. So I am definitely a big proponent of some haze. My favorite product on the market right now is pretty much anything that MDG is putting out. The CO2 stuff is incredible. It's super fine haze. It doesn't show up in anything that is less than an extremely well-defined bright source. So house lights disappear in it. Front light systems disappear in it. Front light key light systems disappear in it.
Are you guys hazing at Turner?
Yes.
Are you guys hazing for the show? Okay.
We use haze on Tuesdays, and it hasn't affected video. We dance somewhere, we're pretty light. We're down in the 2 psi, 2.5 psi, maybe 4 psi if we're really getting crazy. But for the size room and the way the air handlers work, it's all just a big dance, right? You got to figure out your airflow patterns and stuff like that. Awesome. But once you kind of get it dialed in, it's pretty much a set and forget.
We had people comment on it last week.
Keep on, Dusty.
Oh, gotcha. And sorry. And so the MDG stuff is just incredible. CO2 adds a little bit of complexity when you're looking at doing a traveling show, but it's not a huge amount to overcome. I mean, if you're going to have lifts on site, then how much more difficult is it to have some CO2 dropped off, right? So I highly recommend it. I think you can overdo it if you're not careful. And one of the things that I hate the most about haze, and if we get into talking about a worship environment specifically, I would say that one of the things that I try to stay away from the most is seeing haze leave and re-enter an atmosphere. That is one thing that is the most distracting thing for me to see is as a preacher is wrapping up their sermon, seeing this plume of smoke just show up behind the bass cabinet and start filling the space, and immediately I'm thinking about what's on fire back there, right? So I would much rather enter a space that is already pre-hazed, and this may be my personal opinion, but I would rather enter a space that's pre-hazed at a decent level that maintains that level throughout my entire time there, because at least then I can acclimate to it. After entering the building before service, whatever, I can get acclimated to it, and then it's not really an element anymore. It's just it's something that's there, and you can when you do that, you can use lighting as and use beams of light, not necessarily like a Sharpie type beam, but using light in haze as part of your set, rather than having to have physical scenic pieces to be your backdrop.
What would you say to those people, especially in House of Worship, and they might be a little bit older than you or I, who come in and say, oh, this haze is, I can't breathe, especially if you're talking something like a pea soup or some of those CO2 based super small
lay it down on them, Dusty.
Particles.
So any house that I have seen, make the move to a CO2 based hazer, as long as they implement it correctly, as long as they are trained on how to use it and don't hit the gas pedal too hard, right? Those complaints really kind of tailor off and fall out, because you don't notice it. It is in house lights you'd never see it, So
you know what I'm all about though, Dusty. It's all gas, no brake. It's all gas, no brake. You gotta crank that hazer to 10. It's not like those NDGs or those pea soups can actually output that much haze, right?
You just need brighter lights, man.
I think they.
No, I think
know.
you're right. My church switched from a Chave to a pea soup, and overnight complaints kind of went away. Because you don't see it unless you're really wanting to see it with beams and stuff, and particularly during worship, during teaching, you don't see the haze at all. Right, absolutely, and you can, as the LD or the board op or the person controlling the lighting, you can play into that, or you can ease it off some to, like during your pre-service looks where people are filtering in and stuff. Maybe you don't run your lights at full tilt to give the illusion that the room is not full of smoke and it doesn't look like a cloudy Saturday night bar. But yeah. Any environment that has made the steps to getting into a higher quality realm of haze, there's never been any negatives that I've heard come back from that.
Yeah, I remember when we made the switch to the pea soup hazers. There's some more fine tuning that goes on with a CO2 based hazer, specifically because you now have, typically with the hazer, Dusty, what you have, your density and your output, right? Or really just more density. Density and output are kind of tied to each other, and then maybe a fan setting. And all of a sudden, when you're using a CO2 hazer, you have density, you have output, and you have your actual CO2 level out of your regulator.
Yeah. So, and different models and different manufacturers allow you different levels of control. But typically, as an operator, well, in a more permanent install, I would like to have what I'll call intensity or fluid output control from the console. After a couple of weeks and some time going through maybe different seasons, where versus heating versus cooling in the space, stuff like that, I'll figure out the room, and it becomes a rinse and repeat to the point where if you can dial your haze in to where that it simply maintains the amount of haze in the atmosphere that is being taken out by your filtration system and your HVAC, then it's a set and forget, and you don't have to. It's an additional thing that you don't have to worry about as a programmer.
Now, again, it's just honestly, the best way I found to do it is you just take the CO2 output and you just crank it all the way up, and you take the density and you just crank it all the way up, and then again it's all gas, no brakes. Dusty, we get the Southern guy on here for 5 minutes. He's been on here for 55 minutes, and all of a sudden we're saying things like all gas, no brakes, talking about filling rooms of smoke. It doesn't take very long. He's influencing everyone that's on here. I'm gonna have a Southern accent before the night's over, just all because of Dusty. So,
Dusty, before the break, we had one more. We had a question come in from Jacob Wise. Jacob, thanks for asking your questions. I'm gonna ask it as is, and then let you go, Dusty. What is your process for programming lighting for camera? For camera, Jacob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming you mean for broadcast video or for recording. Wherever you're going. So what's your process for the lighting portion of video? What are you really wanting to see first?
Okay, so I'll just lean on my experience from Turner a little bit here. In this scenario, where it's a studio broadcast, there is zero. I wouldn't say zero, but it is of little to no concern what it looks like in the room, right? So I spent probably 5% of my time actually looking at the fixtures in the space. I set some position presets, and then after that, I moved to an area where I could look at a color-corrected monitor, looking through. And I had a router control there so that I could flip between different camera views, and we'd wheel the cameras around, and so I could see different things. But I wasn't looking at the physical rig at all to program that. So I would say that's the biggest difference versus programming an environment for what I'm seeing with my naked eye. I hardly used it at all. And to be honest, it was the looks that I kind of threw together and created looking through my naked eye before I got on to before we had the color corrected monitor available to us. They looked like garbage once I started seeing them through a camera. So yeah, if I'm going into an environment in the mode of I'm going to program this for viewers at home, then I want to see what they're seeing, and I'm not going to be as concerned about what's in the room. I want to look through a lens. I want to look through an accurate monitor, an accurate representation of what they're going to be looking at, so that I can then balance colors and I can balance intensities and everything back to what they're seeing. And I always start, we hadn't talked about meters much at all. I always start with a meter, but at the end of the day, I always work my way back to either what it looks like in person, if I'm going for the live audience aspect, or I'm going to back to what I'm doing on this monitor. If I'm targeting those at home.
Well, and I do want to talk about that next. Sorry, go ahead, Brady.
You said was a calibrated monitor at first. Calibrated monitors aren't as expensive as a lot of people think, and it's worth the investment to see what you're streaming if it's important to you.
Yes, absolutely it is. I remember I was dealing with a calibrated monitor and a non-calibrated monitor at one of my last jobs as well, and yeah, the difference in it's not a linear thing. It's the difference in brightness and contrast and colors overall, and it's different from scene to scene working with a calibrated monitor versus a non-calibrated monitor. And if you don't have the funds or the resources to work with a calibrated monitor, just to get to know different monitors and how they're responding to your video. Some monitors are going to highlight certain colors and brightnesses and black levels more than others. So just know what your monitor is doing to create a neutral image for your viewers too. We've had a great discussion so far in this first hour. It's been really great. We've got NBA on TNT Tuesdays lighting director Dusty Harrison with us, and we're talking about lighting for video. We're super excited to be talking about it, getting your questions answered with Dusty, and I've had a great time so far. And we've got another great hour planned for you as well. We're taking your questions via chat at facebook.com/Force Tech Solutions, as well over on our Facebook page or our YouTube page. For Force Tech. That's linked in the Facebook chat as well if you want to check that out over there and subscribe to us. We need those subs to get to our permanent goal. Also, full 1080 over there. So you can see this red face because it's so hot in this room right now because the windows are open and it's hotter than I anticipated. You can see the full 1080 video there, and we're taking those questions as well. You can also call us 317-586-2844 is the number. At this point in time, we're going to take a short break here. And on the flip side of this, with Dusty here, we're going to talk about white balancing. We're going to talk about how to utilize lighting with LED walls. We're going to talk about a bunch more and also, again, continue to answer your questions. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break. Well, welcome back in. You are listening and or watching and or doing both, watching and listening to P3, the professional production podcast. It's presented to you by Force Tech Solutions. You can get more information about Force Tech by visiting them at force.tech. So right now we've got Dusty Harrison in with us. He is the lighting designer for NBA on TNT Tuesdays. Dusty has so far talked us through how they've built out their studio at Turner Sports for those broadcasts, everything he's done from fixture selection to how he's just created the look he wants with the studio. And bringing Dusty in now, we want to talk about white balance or color temperatures and white balancing. They play hand in hand with each other, and why those two things are so important. So for more on that, I'm going to hit it over to Dusty now. Dusty, tell me, why is the color temperature you choose to roll with for your key lighting and white balancing so important to the look of your video?
Yeah. So, and again, I want to play in a little into the Turner thing for this, because we have two shows in the same studio that the infrastructure on the two varies so greatly. From Thursday night being an incandescent LED program to Tuesday night being full color changing LED. But yet both products, what you see at home when you tune into the shows, both products look the same. In the space, I will tell you that the incandescent Thursday night show is no color correction at all. It is all tuned in at 2700 Kelvin, and can even tend to get a little warmer than that as we dim down to the Tuesday night show that we run at around 4100 Kelvin. We did start, I will say this, we did start with the Tuesday night show being run quite a lot warmer. We were sitting somewhere around the 27, 29, maybe even 3000 Kelvin mark. And we had some issues with we had a couple of issues with our LED video walls where in the reds they were looking a little crushed. So there was not as much depth to the reds, and that was just due to our white point being pushed down so low. So we brought it up to about 4100 Kelvin, or 240. We metered that. So we brought it to 4100 Kelvin, and then restarted the cameras and rebalanced the walls, and we regained a lot of that depth that we were missing in our video walls. And as a byproduct, the colors that I'm seeing in the room are much closer to what you see on the camera. Before, when we were at 2700, and even though the cameras were balanced there, you walk into the room and you see this murky, warm orange, yellow, white, tungsten light, and then you look through a lens and it's this pure crystal clear white, set. And that always threw me off quite a bit. And anybody walking in the space, this is what it looks like. It's not what it looks like at home. To now, where we're running at that cooler color temp, it's a lot closer representation of what you actually see on the screen.
So, talk me through, I guess, the mitigation there, because right now we are having people just, a large chunk of the country is just shooting for broadcast, right? And in fact, majority of the world is just shooting for broadcast right now because the live events aren't allowed to happen. So tell me though, when things kick back up and we inevitably one day in maybe 20 years, we can have people back in the same room. Talk me through mitigation of making it look right for the room, because you said what you were at, 4,200 is what you said?
41.
41. Yeah. Okay. So 4,100 might look a little blue to the natural eye walking into a room. So tell me what you're doing maybe to mitigate, to allow for a good viewership in a broadcast experience, on a live streaming experience, as well as in person.
Yeah. So in a live experience, just looking at the space, what other elements do you have that you're going to compete with? Or can you spin your system to help integrate those issues to make them work better for you, right? So if you're working with projection, most often projection is always color balanced, a lot cooler, so somewhere closer to that 5,000, 5,500 Kelvin, even plus. So if I were to go to a typical corporate setup where you've got a stage wash and you got 2 IMAX screens flanking stage left, stage right, and maybe they have presentations up there as well on a white background, shooting from a projector that's putting out 5,500 Kelvin. If I roll in and put up a stage wash at 2,700 Kelvin, either my people are going to look really orange or their screens are going to look really blue, right? So it's more of a how can I work with my other teams mentality. So I would want to cool off my wash and cool off my talent, so that as people shift their focus between talent and screen or talent and notes, that it's not a drastic color shift. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. We're going to talk more next week too about how to with Simon do some calibration on like the projector and the LED side as well for video, and specifically as it relates to broadcast, because I think you're right. There's the reality of it is that LED walls and what Dusty means by, correct me if I'm wrong, Dusty, what you mean by a projector being calibrated to 5,200 Kelvin is that when you put white on a screen, yes, that white is going to be outputting 5,200 Kelvin, right? That's the white of that screen.
Out of the box, no calibration run, just what the projector does stock to a white image on a screen. What is that color temp?
Yeah, and that's pretty typical for both LED and projection, right? Is that higher blue on the spectrum, you're going to have a higher blue curve than you are going to everything else.
Correct. And I think that even in the psyche of it, just the people expect this. People equate a cooler color temperature on a stage wash versus a house. People equate cooler color temp to brighter and to more impactful than they would like a dingy, incandescent color. Now, if you were to ask, what were the conversations like that led us from lighting the space at 2700 to 4100 Kelvin? Obviously, we rolled in and we're going to match. We were going to try to make and disturb as little of the Thursday night show that has already been happening. We're going to try to disrupt as little of that as we could. So that's how we approached it, and that's where we got to. Let's try to light this at 2700 Kelvin. It wasn't until video came back and said, hey, we're noticing that our reds and our walls are looking a little not there, and we're curious if we bumped this white point up, if that's going to help. And so it's just developing a good camaraderie with your co-teams, and having that open door to be able to go to another team and say, hey, I think this might be better for us. Would you be willing to try it? And so that's what we did. We all came in on a day where we had enough time to tweak. We weren't shooting that day. We just came in to test raising the white point, because it is a process to go through and recolor our front light, and then recolor all the cameras, and then recolor all the walls. And we have several different LED wall products in the space, and they all have to align. So it is a lot to ask of a video engineer or of a colorist. But that's part of how we worked our way up to a cooler color temperature, was just working hand in hand with video to find a point that worked for both of us.
Dusty, go ahead, Nick.
No, go ahead, Brady.
Dusty, you said something that was interesting, and I might be thinking a little bit too much about this one word, but I think it plays into a good conversation. You said the word curious. And I think a lot of people want to say lighting is a lot of science, but it's also a lot of creativity, a lot of magic behind lighting, even if it's just front lighting. Speak to that a little bit, because there's a lot of science, there's a lot of math, there's a lot of angles that you have to work with, that you're using specific color temperatures for specific reasons that have been proven through scientific data. But there's also the creativity, the human, the magic part of lighting.
I think I exercise most of the science of it at every point of the process until I turn the rig on. And then once you turn the rig on and you see it realized, at that point it's like something flips in my brain. You shift modes, and at some point you're not in the vehicle of, hey, this should work because the numbers said that if I put this light at exactly this angle that I would get this many. You're not there anymore. You're all right. This is what we've got. Let's fine tune this. Let's polish this and find and finesse it until you get the result out of the rig that you want. So yeah, I would think that the science and the numbers are great for and necessary for everything that you do in the planning process and in the drafting and in the previous side of things. But then once you get to the point where you're turning lights on and you're starting to make looks, at that point, I'm not going up to a light and holding up a protractor and trying to, at that point I am, all right, let's dial this thing in.
I think it's a lot like music. You have to know the rules before you can start to break them. I went to college and took a lot of music classes as was my major, and you had to know your theory before you could start playing with the rules of music to make what you wanted. And I think same way with audio or lighting or video. I know, and I mostly work in audio myself. Do you ever in lighting get too caught up in the science part to where you start to forget about the creative part? then you have to take a step back and be like, no, I can be creative here. I don't have to dial in this one EQ so perfectly because I can make what is here work through my creativity.
Yeah, oh man, do I get lost in it? Absolutely, 100%. I can finesse, what I call finesse. I can butcher a look until, like, and working with different team leads and different creative directors and such, the ones that I've developed the best working relationship with, they have the ability to come to me and say, hey, you know what? I think that is good enough. Let's move on to the next thing. But that's a deep ridden personality trait of mine. Like, I do not do well accepting things to be good enough. I prefer things to it's either there or it's not. So yes, absolutely. I can over polish my work.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, I was just saying too, as a very, and Dusty, I think you know who I am, as a very analytical person, like wanting to be precise about things and want to have reasons. I want everything to have a reason, and that's one of the reasons why I don't do lighting, is because it's so creative, and there is that creative aspect to it. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think once you start moving into the realm of lighting for broadcast, the creativity slowly starts to move away. If you're lighting for live events, theater or concert, that's where the creativity really lives, right? Because IMAG or video broadcast is kind of secondary to the live experience. We had Simon on last week, or a couple weeks ago, and we'll have Simon on again next week, and he has a full 2-hour segment where he's going to talk about how he's doing video at his live events and as well as video for broadcast. But one of the things that Simon was talking about is for the live concert side, for Keith Urban's tour, it really, the experience is in the house, right? The iMag is kind of just it's what it is. It's image magnification for serving people that don't have the best seats. So, but the reality of it is that their house takes precedence. And for you guys, obviously, even more so, your live broadcast takes precedence, right? So, where Simon and his LDs are working to create this great experience in the house, which can be very subjective. Video is far less subjective, right? Because there are rules to it. So that's probably where it's more scientific and analytical for you, right?
Yeah, and I would say that creativity does not die at the point that you are lighting for broadcast rather than lighting for butts in the seats, right? So I would say I would say that creativity looks different when lighting for broadcast, and that's been one of the biggest things I've noticed in this. My own lighting is going a little wacky here. So that would be one of the biggest things that I have learned in this process, is that things that I would almost never do on for your typical live event stage end up looking pretty great on camera. And so for everybody that is shifting their focus from lighting a live environment space to lighting a space for camera, I would say, try the things that you might not otherwise normally pull out of your arsenal, and see how that translates. Yeah, maybe your entire stage is all synced together doing this one, and you may not ever hit that same effect if the room was packed, right? But on camera, because they're only seeing this portion of a stage, maybe it translates really well.
That's great. Jake Sherman brings up a really interesting question. Excited to hear your thoughts on this. Jake says, a quick diversion to concerts, but still on topic of lighting for video. Would love to hear opinions on lighting for smartphone cameras. Given how often people pull out their smartphones to share on social media, I'm assuming, Jake, you're talking about concerts when everybody and their brother has their phones up, and the person on stage, the person you're going to see, the artist, they really care about how they look on social media, because now it goes from the 100,000 people at that concert to the millions of people that see that social media. So as a lighting designer, specifically for concerts, are you taking into account people pulling out their cameras and using the wonderful iPhone camera or Android camera that they have on them to put out a good piece of content?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jake, for that awesome question. I would say you're going to be left behind if you don't. Today's market is going to require you to give that social media factor to your shows. And I don't think that I approach that any differently than I would approach than I have approached, say, lighting this event down at Turner Studios. If my goal was to create looks that translated well on camera on a pocket-sized mobile device camera, then I'm going to pull out my iPhone and I'm going to set it up, and I'm going to look at those looks through that camera and find out, okay, well, what things translate, what things don't translate so much. But for the most part, mobile technology has progressed so far that when I am shooting shows and I'm shooting events through my phone, working with an iPhone 11 or whatever here, and when I'm shooting events through it, it's pretty spot on. So there's not a lot of, I don't think that there's a ton of extra emphasis that I have to do versus like working with a broadcast specific camera.
But you're keeping in mind, you're thinking, you might pull out your phone every once in a while, take a quick shot or take a quick video, see how it looks, because, and we do this all the time. There has to be sacrifices in every single part to bring everything up to the level of quality, whether it be sacrifices for parts of the room and audio, or parts of, one camera might not look, at least in a live environment, definitely different in studio. But one camera might suffer a little bit to bring another camera up, and that way they're both at an equal level of professionalism.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, 100% agree.
So we're taking your calls. We're taking your questions via chat and Facebook right now. We've got Dusty on. We've got Brady on. We're talking about lots of good things. I've got a great question for Brady next, too, that he's going to love, and I didn't prep him for. So I'm really excited about that.
I'm excited.
Fun. What's that?
I said I'm excited.
You should be. Yeah, you absolutely should be. But our phone number here is 317-586-2844. Whether you want to call in and ask your lighting questions, or you want to also even brag on your system, tell what you're doing about your live streaming right now. We more than welcome those calls. Taking your questions via Facebook and chat, Facebook chat and YouTube chat as well. We're doing that all night long. So we've got 37 minutes left in the show, and Dusty is standing by ready to answer your questions. So you're not ever going to get a chance to ask someone like Dusty, who's so kind, so Southern, so nice, to answer your questions about lighting again. He's probably Dusty, are you the biggest lighting deal ever to come out of the great state of Alabama, you think?
Absolutely not. No, I don't think so. But
I didn't know what the Alabama lighting community was like.
Well, they just recently got electricity, so it's new.
Before they were using just the lenses out of source bores and stuff to reflect light.
Kerosene lanterns, just that's where you pour more gas to it though, so no brakes.
So more gas equals higher intensity, and then less gas equals less intensity, right?
Absolutely.
That's a southern dimmer right there.
Yes, 100%.
Now you had a bunch of southern jokes set up for this, but
did I?
I've only heard one of them so far. So I need to. We got about 36 minutes left. We have to make sure we get those southern jokes in.
Okay, I'll try to push some of those through.
All right, sweet. So, question I had for you is this. So, we have asked this question to all of the guests we've had on, and this is a fun question, right? Because this is supposed to be a fun show. Everyone right now is dealing with way too much serious stuff for this not to be fun. So the question I have for you, Dusty, is, and one day I'll reveal my own answer, but and I'll have Brady reveal his own answer too, because we haven't gone yet. But what is maybe it's been with NBA on TNT Tuesdays, maybe it's been separate than that, but what has been your biggest oh crap moment where you're about to go live, whether it's on a broadcast or whether it's in a live production, and you just say, oh crap. And you've got to fix some stuff. And then what happened? Did you fix it? Are you that good?
Oh man. What has been okay. So all right, we'll just jump into it. So I was doing an event for it was a product release for North Face, and the event was in Manhattan, but we did a week of rehearsals here, and it involved a large pyramid that was projection mapped, and it had a robotic arm that moved the top around, and projection followed it, and it was a fair amount of technology to go into it was a fair amount of technology to go into any event, even notwithstanding the fact that this event came up 3 weeks before show date. So it was a super tight schedule. We did our week of rehearsals in the fabrication facility, and we're hanging trusses and lights and rigs off these gantry trains in their factory, because as they're building the set, they're bringing it over and putting it in place, and we're aligning projectors to light it. And so it was this whole time coded 8 to 10 minute show that is going to run in New York, and we got a light rig in there, and we're going to rehearsals and everything. And I will say that we never realized in rehearsals all the different pieces of the show happening together. So we leave for New York without yet have seen all the nice puzzle pieces come together. Once we land in New York, we have a couple of days to load in. There's a bit of logistical, just everything falls apart when you have this super tight crunch timeline. And so there's some logistical issues just getting gear physically in and out of the venue. They couldn't accept 53-foot trucks, so we ended up having to offload all of our 53s at a freight yard, and then shuffle those over to 24-foot box trucks, straight trucks, to actually get them into the docks of the venue. So even an already delayed show was being pushed more and more and more back. We had a couple of days what days were supposed to be spent tweaking the product, we're still spending writing custom software, and they brought in software engineers to write software to translate the data path from the robot arm into the D3 media server so the projection would follow the robot. They brought in another specialist that deals with BlackTrax to put BlackTrax trackers on the pyramid that moved in case the custom, as a backup, in case the custom software solution did not work. And so in days that we're supposed to have the final product and we're just supposed to be polishing and enhancing it and making it fit the space, we're still figuring it out, right? And so the day before show, we started early, we worked long, and actually never got to go back to my room that night. And then worked all day the next day, right up until doors. And at the point when we get to doors, we still have yet to see. I know that lighting is working. I know that we're listening to time code. I know that the stuff that we've built is functioning. But at the point when we get to doors, we have yet to see all the various pieces that are all being triggered, whether it's audio playback or it's lighting, it's robot, it's D3 media, or whatever. At the point when we get to doors, we haven't seen everything together yet. And there is a media hour where the press comes in, and within that hour, the show runs once, and then after the press hour doors open, there's a musical performance, and then halfway through that performance, the time-coded show runs again. So for that first show for media hour, that was our first time, and I'll let you know, it did go off, it did happen. But that was the very first time seeing it all come together. And so while it wasn't an oh crap, moment of, oh, nothing is working, it was I was sitting on pins and needles. I'd been up for 37 and a half hours or so, sitting there at a desk, programming cues, and I had no idea if this was going to function or not. And
now,
in
a way, though, it's kind of fun, right? Like, just be honest. Just be honest. In a way, I think that there's something engraved in production people, in us, that we like the tight deadlines, and we like the uncertainty, and we like having to deal with stuff on the fly, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't challenge ourselves. I think we rise up to the challenge. So in a way, you have to admit, it went off without a hitch. There's a reason why people hire professionals, so that on tight deadlines, we can make those things happen. And in a way, it's kind of fun, right?
I think it's an adrenaline rush, and I think all production people have not maybe that similar of a story, but a story of, hey, all of this was failing. We had 2 seconds to make it right, and at the end of the day, it was a phenomenal show. And it's that rush, and it's the story, and it's the feeling and the camaraderie of coming together as a team to pull off the impossible time in and time out.
One day I'll tell my oh crap story. Not seeing something through the first time. I'll do it. We'll do that. I think next week we're having on Simon. The week after that, we're talking about graphics for video. And then we've got something planned. It's called I'm going to just name it right now. I'm going to call it the P3 Mega Show, which is going to be our recap week.
The Mega Show. I like it.
You like that? It's going to be the P3 Mega Show. We're going to be doing some fun things that week. So, and then that's going to be our fun week. We can pull out whatever you want to, the fun beverages or something. If we're still in quarantine by then, we're going to have a real fun show. That's all I'm going to say. We'll have a good chat. That'll be a good interactive show, and it's going to be a little bit more lighthearted than these last couple of shows have been. So, Dusty, I've got a question for you here. This one's from Brian. It says, Dusty, how important do you think the addition of Lime LED is, or is it at all? Hope you are doing well. That one's from Brian. Dusty, Lime LEDs, in, outs, good, bad?
Question, by the way.
It is. Question. That's an ETC question, I think, right? ETC was they were kind of the inventor of the Lime LEDs, right? So what are your thoughts there?
Did ETC invent it, or did Chauvet come out with it first?
No, it was ETC. ETC came out with Lime LEDs, 6 or 7 years ago, I think, with their first, the color source pars, or the lusters were the first ones to have.
You see it all the time now, so.
Yeah.
Yes, but there was another, and it's been a long time since I've looked at this information, but there was another manufacturer at the same time that was pursuing mint LEDs, right? So both roughly the same kind of thing, filling those gaps between the narrow bands of peaks between red, green, and blue, traditional LED color changing, unit. But is Lime important? Absolutely. It's if you run, if you ever get your hands on a Luster 2 or a what am I trying to say? A fixture that does multi-segmented color mixing, like the color mixing system that's in a Luster 2. You can compare side by side. Just bring up red, green, and blue to full next to bringing up all of the secondary colors that are in the unit, the lime, the cyan, and the amber and the UV even. And look at the difference in whites that you get. Even without red, green, and blue in the mix, the white that you see out of the secondary color of the unit, it's a different game. Absolutely, it really does fill it in. Looks great on camera, and Tuesday nights, self plug here, but Tuesday nights is fully key lit. With at least their desk positions are all fully key lit with Luster 2s, and we are absolutely using 7 of those diodes in those fixtures.
And a good segue for that, Dusty. If people want to get a hold of you, your email, dusty@dustylights.com. They can also follow you on Instagram, right, at DustyATL. So if they've got questions for you, dusty@dustylights.com. Yeah, that work for you?
Absolutely. Please send them to me.
Awesome. Yeah.
Happy to talk more in depth about any of this stuff, or one-on-one personal cases, or however I can help. I've got nothing else going on.
Yeah, well, same with us. And we'll have Dusty back on again. Dusty's a good friend. I want to see Dusty back in Indianapolis here once we're allowed to travel again. But Dusty's a good friend. Dusty will be back on from time to time, I'm sure, talking about some new stuff that they're doing and new stuff that Dusty's doing. I would love some time for us to sit down and talk about the projection mapping that you did. I don't know how much of that is public, so Dusty and I will talk about that off air. But Dusty had sent me some pictures about that, of what he was doing with the projection mapping and the lighting he was doing at a show.
Projection mapping.
To say that it was sophisticated. Yeah, this is a different level of projector mapping. I would say this is close to rivaling what some of the stuff that Disney does. What Disney does is more sophisticated, obviously, with other things other than projection mapping. But this involved, like I said, I won't get too detailed into it, but involved moving and projection mapping. So it was tracking and mapping. It was pretty sophisticated. So I don't want to go too much into it, not only because I don't know if we can, and the other thing is I want Dusty to talk about that some other time on the show too. So there's a teaser for you to come back, and we'll get more into that later. Dusty, it's been more and more common recently. I want to talk about this. More and more commonly, we hear the question, we've got an LED wall. It's behind our talent. Now we're having trouble with getting lighting to work with LED walls or cameras to work with LED walls. At the Turner Studios there, you guys are using obviously a very large, if you haven't ever seen it before, I wish I had a picture of it. I should have prepared better. Google it. It's just the... Yeah. Okay. It's the. Are you hating on me right now?
Me?
What you said? You said I had a full 2 hours to do it.
No, a full 2 hours to do.
I can't hear you now.
Projection mapping.
What happened? Did you turn your gain down? Oh gosh, we've lost Brady. We've lost Brady.
Oh well.
All right, we'll come back to Brady.
I think you've got a pretty serious lag going.
Probably we do. Everything. We'll talk about how we're doing the setup later. Oh yeah. But I don't know if Brady can hear me or not. So anyways, more and more people are being introduced into the world of LED walls and calibrating LED walls with video. You guys have a large, if you want to look it up, like I said, I should have the pictures for it, but I don't. If you look it up, it would just Turner TNT NBA Studios probably is the best way to look it up on Google Images there. But you guys have a very large, how big is the LED wall behind you, Dusty?
Ooh, 16 feet by 8 feet. It's not overly huge, I wouldn't say.
The very back wall?
Probably reads bigger on camera. Yeah, the very back wall.
No, it does. And Shaq standing up next to it skews it as well. Tell me how you're lighting for that. And then I know you don't, you are in video world, but you're not. But then what does that look like in the room? Because I think that's a big thing with LED is that what looks right for the room, as we've been saying, doesn't necessarily look right on camera. So is it dark in the room? Is it bright in the room? What are things that you're seeing huge differences from when you're looking at the monitor to where you're looking at, looking in the room at the LED wall, and how are you lighting for it?
So if you were to walk into the room, you would be shocked at just how dim it is in place. And that is driven primarily by talent. We do have talent that is their eyes are very sensitive to light, and with any significant amount of light, eyes start to water really bad. So, and so we try to run key light as low as possible, getting just enough light through the lens of the camera, cranking the cameras up, getting just enough light through the lens, and then obviously we copy and paste those parameters over to the set lighting as well. So we try to tone that stuff down, roll that stuff way back. It's pretty dim. The LED walls in the room are running at 5-6% on the processor. So yeah, the whole space is very dark, and it is driven 100% by talent.
Nice. So that's really important to keep in mind too, is that, and I thought about that earlier. For example, the room that I'm sitting in right now, and the room that you're sitting in, is a really, I'm assuming your room has a warm light on you, right? That light is coming through, and it's
this one here.
Yeah,
it's actually super cold.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so my room light is really warm. But there's something to be said about the environment that people are in, right? And you don't want to kill your talent. You don't want to. Are you switching your color temperature right now on it?
Absolutely.
Nice. You don't want to kill your talent though, right? You don't want to make it so uncomfortable, whether it be bright or just a cool, a crazy color temperature, warm or cool, to where it makes them not feel, comfortable, right? Because half of this is about not half of it, a quarter of it is about an environment where people can still host a show and not, be hindered by the environment they're in, right?
Right. But it is a tight dance, working with talent, and your goal is to get the best product while still making them as comfortable as they can. They need to be relaxed in their space. They need to be able to talk to each other, and the second that some of your talent puts their hands up over their eyes to see out into the house, your look is, like, I would much rather run a lower stage wash or a higher angle and have to mix in footlights. We didn't talk a whole lot about front light angles vertically. Obviously, the lower is, try to get as low as you can, but at some point you're going to run into limitations of the talent doesn't want to be staring straight down the barrel. You don't want to be throwing light all over your backdrop. If your talent and your backdrop are real close, that's going to push you up. And as it pushes you up, as you get more altitude on those fixtures, then you can start throwing in things like more steep sides. You could do some of the footlights and kick some light up into the shadows, stuff like that. But yeah, I've gotten a little long-winded, but the goal is to make the talent as comfortable as they can be, and if they're not comfortable, they can't do their job to the best that they should be able to.
Here's a random question I have for you too. Is there anything specifically you have to do to make sure that? So I'm assuming you guys are using a mixture of prompters, and then the talent has papers on the table as well, right? Which that table's not cheap, I'm assuming, that you guys are using. But tell me about. Is there any specific considerations you have to take into account to make sure that they can see prompters, they can see papers on tables and things like that, so they can continue obviously to host the show well?
There's so many light sources. So on that desk that you see with 4 to 5 hosts, there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 plus units focused just on talent. So there's not a dark spot to be had. The biggest concerns that we have working with an acrylic topped desk would obviously be reflection off of the desk back onto the person, or reflection off of the desk back onto Scenic. So you mentioned we have prompters. Yes, they have papers. But some will choose to bring their laptops out, and that's been one of the bigger struggles. Is when the lid is open, you get most laptops produce a lot of blue light. So competing with that blue light on their skin and trying to make a match, which is another proponent for having flexible color changing front light. Because if somebody decides to bring out their laptop for this segment, and you got to think talent rolls into place, maybe you get a good 60 seconds before you're on air, right? So if somebody decides to bring out their laptop, there's not a ton of time to react, but you can quickly grab their focus position and then roll a little more warmth into it to combat the blue light, so that segment to segment, everybody looks the same whether they have a laptop in front of them or not.
That's really interesting too. I've never thought about that, about making sure that, other outside light sources, how they affect that, and then dealing with that live. I mean, anyone that's ever worked with talent, specifically any high level talent that is very used to rolling in front of a camera, and just stepping in front of a camera and doing a shoot, knows that, they don't like to spend a lot of time prepping, and they'll give you the time that you need. Most of the people I've worked with before will give you the time that you need. But at the same time, if you don't ask them to, if you don't ask them to give you that time, they're just going to step in front of the cameras 30 minutes or 30 seconds before you go live. And that's that. For most of these people, they're super comfortable, right? They don't need a lot of time to prep. So the second you're right, they plop down the laptop and open up Chrome, and it's the Google page, right? And it's just shining white light, which that white light we've talked about again. I'm assuming that's just like a projector and LED wall, where that white light is, that is a high color temperature, and now they're purple, right? Now, you think you have an aggressive color temperature before at 4,100, but now you're shining 5,600 on someone's face, and the camera sees a lot more of that than you do. Talk to me about what the camera sees versus what we see, right? Because the dynamic range on a camera, whether it be, from talking about color dynamic range, or even just lightness dynamic range, right? Because you guys are not shooting this program in HDR, I'm assuming, just at the studios, right? That all is seen a lot more on your reference monitors, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So I absolutely always start with a meter. But I always come back to, how does it actually look on the monitor? Because I don't care what the meter says. If somebody calls in and says, "Hey man, this person looks really bad," the meter said they were supposed to look fine. It doesn't really carry a lot of weight, right? So always come back to what you're actually realizing with your own eyes, and don't rely strictly on a meter. Cameras are so much more sensitive than your eyes could hope to be. Trust what you're seeing. Trust your colorists. Trust the people that have dialed in the cameras and the monitors to know that you're getting a representation of what your viewers are seeing, and you should be in good shape.
Dusty, you worked with me, and you've worked with me on some pretty low budget solutions as well. So, obviously you're working right now in an area where budget isn't much of a concern, but you've worked on some pretty low budget stuff with me. And, coming out of, I know what you did in the past, like with some of the when you were younger, the stuff you were doing locally there. We've had a question about maybe some down to earth lighting solutions. What are some cheap and dirty tricks that you're doing with some everyday stuff, maybe that get really good results, and maybe something that's just, you've even just stuck with it, because why spend money on something when you can do it for a little less expensive? What's some stuff that just works? Can you think of anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody, well, before I jump into that, I did send you a text. Don't want to check your phone if you've got that, but I would say that I hear that Hanes has really good crew cut diffusion available. So
No, it's V-neck diffusion.
Oh, it's V-neck. I'm sorry.
Always a V-neck.
V-neck diffusion. Hey, as long as you're running it probably would lend itself to work better with an LED. With LED, I'm assuming, right?
And then, over the counter solutions for lighting problems, wax paper. If you don't want to drop a ton of money on a roll of gel, and you need something to break up the skittles of some uplights on a wall, and you don't want to get those streaks. Wax paper is you run that stuff through a bandsaw, you cut it for a couple of inches wider than your fixture is. And yeah, it's pretty simple, cheap solution that you can buy at the grocery store to getting rid of some of those rainbow streaks.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I remember we used, especially wax paper is really solid too when you're doing weird shaped lights, like even Baden LED fixtures, for example. Like that's actually a really great solution when, normal gel doesn't really come in rolls that are, I guess some of them are long enough to do, but if you're doing like long Baden strips, that are really low heat, wax paper works great to do diffusion with that. So
I would tag onto that and say that out of any sector of our industry, I would say that theater or houses of worship are more often faced with being creative within a tighter budget than maybe corporate or concert touring or film or TV or some of these other outlets. So I would say walk into your local theater and check out some of the wild things that they can come up with and be creative with for a cheap run to the hardware store.
For sure. No, there's lots of things you can do creatively, especially when it comes to non-key lights, right? If they're just lights for backgrounds, then that is, we've oftentimes talked about, one of my favorite looks is a light dipped in like tin paint that just reflects, and then using just one of those like work lights, just so you get the glow of the reflection and don't see the element actually. I've always thought that was really cool. Got a question really quick from Kyle to Dusty, if you can answer this right quick. Kyle said, if Dusty's light is super cool, then why are we seeing it super warm? Tell us about real quick, like the effects of white balance, and especially a camera like this, which is probably auto white balancing, right? So as you change your color temperature, it's changing. But tell us, I won't go too much farther. Tell us about what's happening as you change color temperature on your light, why you still look warm.
So I'm gonna chalk that up to be this super high quality prosumer FaceTime camera that I'm using here on my Mac. I don't have any kind of fancy camera setups here. So you're just looking at the built-in camera on my MacBook, and it wants my skin tone to be warmer than I want it to be. So I am having to go to the extreme of cranking this light all the way into blue oblivion to combat how warm my camera wants it to be red. So it would probably read me somewhere, and you get kind of into Oompa Loompa territory, and it doesn't feel natural, and I don't know if I've ever been that tan. So yeah, I just hang out here in blue land and try to get my skin tone closer to where I want it to be. I wish I had, maybe there's an app out there or a plugin or something that'll allow me to park my white balance on the built-in camera, but I did not come that prepared.
Well, just so you know, for next time we do this, OBS will allow you to take control of that camera actually and do your own color correction on OBS. So that's a good way to use
now
OBS.
You tell me. That's great.
I know. next week, I swear, next time you come on, Dusty, I'll be more prepared than I was this week for this. So, So yeah, we've got about 6 minutes left. We can still answer your questions in chat, whether it be on Facebook or YouTube. Again, guys, head over to that YouTube page as well. The link is in the Facebook chat, and make sure you're checking that out and subscribing, please. That would be super helpful for us.
We jumped up to 33 subscribers.
As we close up here, and real quick, we do have a question. Let's hit this first, and then we'll go to our closing thoughts. We've got a question here about lights for home studio streaming or web conferences. Do you have any advice there, Dusty, on just lights? Nice. I love that.
Same principles apply. That's an awesome question too. I would, if you have the space, bigger soft lights are always, if I were to say easier, I'm sure I'm going to get some photographers arguing with me on that, but bigger soft lights seems to be a pretty quick set and forget and throw around kind of a solution. I was helping a buddy fill out a home studio not long ago, and there was several products on, even just like for a budget, Amazon, for some units that would do variable color temperature that also seem to have a pretty high CRI. The CRI rating is probably the first thing I'm going to look at, and then if I'm shooting in any type of room where I'm going to have natural daylight to compete with, I want to be able to control as much color as I can, and whether that's with a dial on the unit where I can mix in a little bit more warm or a little bit more cool, or if it's using, gel, just to color the light to match the other sources in the room that I can't easily compete with, aside from gelling an entire window of sunlight, So yeah, I would push towards soft lights. I would try to get as much intensity as you can, and CRI would be my number one driving factor.
And the last question we're going to take for the night, Dusty, is this. In a minute, explain 3-point lighting. That's easy to do, right?
In a minute, explain 3-point lighting. Well, you see you've got the foul line, and then behind that you've got this big arch that goes in, and if you shoot from behind that line, then it's worth 3 points, right? So there you go. That's 3-point lighting. Sorry, that was terrible basketball joke. Come on, Indiana.
This is Indiana.
We loved every bit of that. That was awesome.
3-point lighting is in two fills, but at the end of the day, it's all key lights, depending on where somebody is facing. Like I said, my center key is straight on, dead ahead of where I am standing on stage. My two fill lights, I try to go somewhere around 30 to 35 degrees off of center for my key lights. We touched a little bit on that earlier, and then I would go even farther out to maybe 65 or 75 for sides. But yeah, it's pretty simple. It's two lights coming in from the side, one light coming in from the center, and the lights coming in from the side are going to do most of your heavy lifting, and the one coming in the center is going to fill in just the weird shadows down the center of the face that you can't really hit otherwise.
And that is your 1 minute long explanation of 3-point lighting.
I think that was almost right on.
Dusty Harrison. That was
right
solid,
on.
Dusty.
1 minute.
I'm impressed with that. Real quick, we got 2 minutes left. I want to hit around the room. In following our normal schedule, he'll probably say something like, why do I have to go first?
Here, I'll just say it. Why do I have to go first, Nick?
There it is. We're going to do our closing thoughts in 30 seconds or less. Brady, go for it.
Closing thoughts real quick. One, if you can get Dusty's budget, get it. That way your lighting looks impeccable. And two, always remember, this is creative. What we do in production, there's a creativity to it. Of course, there's a science. Follow the science and then break the rules a little bit. Be creative. Be brave to do something that somebody else hasn't done before. Even if it's been proven wrong, try it. See what happens. Get together with some smart people and some friends with your lighting or audio or video, and just try some things. But, don't do it live, of course, but take a few minutes and just be creative with what you guys are doing right now.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot, especially in the lighting world. Lighting is a great place to be creative and to mess around with some maybe cost-effective solutions for it too. Dusty, your closing thoughts.
Lighting is one of the things that shaped me early on in my lighting career. Is that somebody told me that there is no wrong way to do lighting. And that's something that I've carried with me over the years, is that while different people are going to have different approaches, at the end of the day, if you hit your target, if you achieve your goal, then you did lighting, So get out there, try some things. It doesn't take the world's tallest budget to do what we do. And at the end of the day, gear and consoles and everything else aside, all we're doing is just turning lights on and off.
At the end of the day, that's right. It's still that. It's all about turning lights on and off. That's awesome. Well, Brady, as usual, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks, guys.
And
thank you,
Dusty, thank you so much for taking your time out of your obviously very busy schedule right now to join us. It's on a level of professionalism, and having you on the show, it's good to talk to you. But on a just a hanging out with you level and not seeing you in a while, it's good to talk to you there too, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate you having me out.
Yeah, thank you. So that's the show for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you watched it live or you're watching this on demand. We appreciate it. Once again, we are live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Force Tech Solutions. As well, on the YouTube page, we need your help to get the permanent link for the YouTube page. Go over there and subscribe. Just search for us. Force Tech is over there. That's also been posted as well in the Facebook chat too. As usual, during next week's show, we want to take your questions. You can post those either in the Facebook chat or the YouTube chat, as well as call our number 317-586-2844. You can also email us at info@force.tech. I want to thank tonight our partners for doing the stream. Number one is OBS, Open Broadcast Software. All of this is being done through OBS. It's an incredible software. Check out OBS and considering donating to OBS if you're using this software to do your productions. Also want to thank our high definition video transport is via MediaLux. Check them out, MediaLux.com. I'd like to thank our guests once again, my normal co-host Brady Davis, and our guest tonight, Dusty Harrison, for talking all about lighting. It was great to have him on. Graphics for this program are provided by Brett Goodrich. Want to thank Back at the Office too, Jenny Fager, for taking phone calls and helping out with the logistics. And again, guys, join us next week. We're back here at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can check that out. We're going to be talking with Simon Roberts. Simon is the video engineer for Keith Urban. He's going to be guiding you through, for lack of better terms, how to do video for video. So we're really excited about that as well too. Once again, thank you all so much for joining us. We hope to see you here back next week. This show is presented by Force Technology Solutions. For more information about our company and how we can better help you, visit us at force.tech. So until next week, I hope that you are safe, hope that you are well, hope that you are continuing to strengthen your own skills in video, audio, and lighting, and hopefully you're well until then. So we look forward to seeing you next week right back here. Thanks.
Behind every flawless performance,
or game-changing meeting,
or important broadcast,
and even a powerful Sunday morning worship service,
there are people just like us.
Well, us actually.
And we're not in it for the glory.
We're quite content staying right here behind the scenes.
It's where we belong.
It's where we want to be. Our reward is being unseen.
Because we know
that when we do our jobs well,
most people won't realize that we've done them at all.
Our mission is to partner with you
to design the best audio, visual, and technology experience that meets your needs.
And then step back behind the curtain to make sure it always runs without a glitch.
When it does,
you get to accomplish bigger and better things.
Supported by well-designed technology.
Not hindered by it.
And in the end,
your success becomes ours.
And we wouldn't have it any other way. We are Force Tech.
We are Force Tech.
We are Force Tech.